In rare moments, the human nervous system is hijacked on a mass scale. Entire populations are seized by violent behaviors spreading like a plague. Between the 13th and 17th centuries, European crowds were gripped by choreomania, the dancing plague. Subjects engaged in frenzied movement, dancing involuntarily for days until reaching total physical collapse or death. Fast forward to 1962, on an entirely different continent, a similar anomaly erupted in Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania. It began in a village school. Pupils experienced a sudden onset of uncontrollable laughing and crying, rapidly escalating into violent physical agitation. These physical symptoms spread outward from the initial school directly into the neighboring communities. The medieval European outbreaks routinely encompassed hundreds of citizens in a single episode. Decades later, the Tanganyika event ultimately afflicted over 1,000 people in the region bordering Lake Victoria. Centuries and continents separate these two events, yet both present the exact same clinical profile: a devastating, highly contagious manifestation of involuntary mass physical exertion. The immediate medical assumption in both eras was to search for a physical cause. Severe, contagious physical degradation points directly toward a biological pathogen, an infection, or environmental contamination. The clinical reality contradicts this. In 1962, exhaustive medical investigations tested subjects for food poisoning, toxic substances, and viral encephalitis. The results were entirely negative. There was no biological agent. Clinically, these events are classified as Mass Sociogenic Illness, specifically the motor variant type. The contagion operates as a cognitive virus. It mirrors the structural spread of an infection, but it bypasses the body's immune system entirely. The transmission vector requires no physical contact. It utilizes only sight and sound to directly hijack the host's nervous system. To understand how these outbreaks function, we must abandon the search for biological pathology. We have to map the mechanics of a sociogenic contagion. For decades, historians attempted to attribute the European plagues to ergotism, mass poisoning caused by consuming rye infected with the Claviceps purpurea fungus. The clinical record dismisses this hypothesis. Ergot poisoning routinely causes gangrene and the loss of extremities, symptoms completely absent in the dancing populations. Furthermore, fungal ingestion cannot explain why the mania strictly recurred on specific calendar dates, such as the anniversary of the Feast of St. Vitus. In Italy, a localized variant known as tarantism was blamed on spider bites. Victims claimed the landum induced their dancing frenzies, yet the disease required no physical contact with insects to spread. Contemporary physical examinations routinely proved no spider bites were ever present. Modern analysis struggles with similar misconceptions regarding the 1962 Tanganyika event. Because the primary symptom was laughing, observers assumed the epidemic was triggered by a humorous stimulus. The laughter was devoid of merriment or joy. It was a painful, exhaustive physical reflex, indicating massive nervous system overload. Neither toxicological poisoning nor positive emotional stimuli possess the mechanical capability to trigger systemic, highly contagious motor illness. The first law of sociogenic contagion is that the virus cannot infect a healthy population. It requires a thoroughly compromised host environment to take root. Medieval Europe was primed by famine, the trauma of the Black Death, and spiritual oppression from the clergy. In Tanganyika, the host environment was shaped by acute cultural transition. The outbreak occurred immediately following national independence, a period of intense social friction. At the local level in Bukoba, young students faced the severe disciplinary environment of Western-run Catholic schools, clashing directly with traditional local culture. This creates a direct point of friction. The affected population harbors identical, inescapable chronic stress, with zero available psychological outlet. This localized accumulation of unresolved psychological pressure is the crucial, invisible incubation phase of the epidemic. The outbreak requires a catalyst. This is the index case, or prodromal patient, the first individual whose nervous system collapses under the accumulated weight of the environment. Unable to process the stress psychologically, the brain translates the internal pressure into a violent, involuntary external physical symptom. Transmission occurs instantly. The disease spreads the moment a compromised peer simply looks at or listens to the index case experiencing the attack. This creates a sympathetic neural collapse. Observing the symptom triggers an identical nervous system failure in those harboring the same latent stress. This is separate from mass anxiety hysteria, which usually presents as fainting or hyperventilation. This is mass motor hysteria, a condition demanding extreme prolonged physical action, lasting for months or even years. The efficiency of the vector is absolute. The only pathogen required to infect an entire community is the sight or sound of a pier breaking down. If this motor variant is a universal neurological response to severe stress, why does it manifest specifically as dancing in medieval Europe and laughing or crying in 1960s Tanganyika? The answer lies in the medical anthropology concept of the sick role. For the physiological symptom to be effective, it must align with a culturally recognized, socially acceptable label. Medieval European culture provided a pre-existing template. The deeply ingrained myths of ancient Dionysian cults and the localized legends of St. Vitus's dance offered an established narrative for the physical frenzy. This selection of symptoms is completely unconscious. The afflicted subjects are not acting, they are trapped in a genuine, involuntary motor loop. The extreme symptom acts as a desperate physiological escape hatch. It is a socially acceptable manifestation of illness deployed by the brain when all conscious coping mechanisms are annihilated. Once introduced, the cognitive virus follows a path of exponential replication, jumping from the index case to hundreds and then thousands of individuals. The macroscopic consequence of the motor variant is complete disruption. The physical symptoms are so debilitating and the spread so rapid that normal societal functions become impossible to maintain. Work ceases entirely in the affected European towns. In Tanganyika, over 14 schools are forced to shut down, sending students away for months. Here we find the paradoxical utility of mass psychogenic illness. The virus successfully enforces a localized quarantine. It forces society to halt, effectively removing the population from the unbearable environmental friction that caused the stress in the first place. When subjected to inescapable collective pressure, the human brain will bypass logic entirely. It will weaponize its own motor system into a contagious disease, simply to force the world to stop.